everyone, it's Anthony. Back in January, I made a comment in my 2021 public domain video claiming that I don't like F. Scott Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby. This comment sparked a number of patrons to ask me why, and I thought that I knew. However, the last time I had read it was back in 2010, I believe, which was my sophomore year of high school, and I couldn't come up with a comprehensive reason for why I didn't like it. And so after receiving those inquiries, I decided to reread The Great Gatsby in its entirety to determine why I don't care for it. And let me tell you directly, my feelings have not changed on this subject. But to make things interesting, I've asked Noonan Carnegie director Susan Crutchfield to share her positive view of the book so we can see why people do enjoy it. How's it going, Susan?
Hi, everybody. Thanks for asking me to join you, Anthony. I personally have loved The Great Gatsby ever since I first read it for the first time, probably in my late teens. We had a healthy debate at the Carnegie after Anthony's public domain video where I defended The Great Gatsby and he said he did not care for it. However, I did realize that I have not reread The Great Gatsby since 2013, so I thought I better read it again to make sure I still loved it and that I could hold my own in a debate. Turns out I still love it, guys. Spoiler alert.
So I think that the best way to probably go about this is to discuss the book by breaking it down into three parts, right? By writing style of F. Scott Fitzgerald's writing style, his characters, and his themes. So let's do it. Susan, do you want to go first? Or you want me to start?
You go first, Anthony.
All right. So the very first note that I wrote down when I first reread The Great Gatsby was, wow, Fitzgerald's gonna be this wordy throughout the whole thing, isn't he? And I think I was right. In my personal opinion, I think I'm right. Fitzgerald in this novel writes from the perspective of Nick Carraway, who I think and I recognize as an unreliable narrator. And I can absolutely enjoy stories with unreliable narrators. Like Agatha Christie's The Murder of Roger Ackroyd is one of my favorite murder mystery novels of all time. What Christie does in her novel that I find to be more compelling than what Fitzgerald does is that she makes the narrator seem more like a moral bystander, just someone you'd see on the street watching the events take place from the novel, and in a way acts as a stand-in for the audience member until Christie's big twist at the end. Fitzgerald, I think, takes a different approach to his narrator. Just like in Roger Ackroyd, Nick Carraway initially seems like he's going to be a bystander throughout the story, letting the events unfold around him. But through the story, you realize how disingenuous Nick seems, and it just gets worse and worse as you go on. Have you ever just been in front of somebody who's telling you a story, but you know for a fact that they're lying to you? And so, but they just keep talking and talking, adding more and more details to it. And you know that they're adding these details because they're lying. That's what it feels like with Nick Carraway. And with Nick's narration, it seems like there are moments where he skips over things. There are contradictory statements, misleading information. There are moments, and this is just a personal thing, when I was reading the story and I'm listening to him, when I'm listening to Nick and reading what he has to say, my mind goes blank and I have to go back a few paragraphs just to remember what he said, because I'm sick of listening to him lie to me the entire story. And I don't know, maybe I wrote down here that maybe there's like a reason that F. Scott Fitzgerald wrote it this way, to make a commentary on certain things that we'll probably get into later. But that doesn't mean that I enjoy being lied to an entire story. What did you think about his writing style, Susan?
Well, the wordiness of Fitzgerald's writing was something that you didn't like at all. It was something that I love. I adore books that use rich descriptions that can bring a scene to life with really vivid detail. So I really like wordiness. I think Fitzgerald does this really well in The Great Gatsby, and also in The Beautiful and Damned, another one of his books that I really love. Come on, Anthony. I mean, how can you not love the line, the silver pepper of the stars and the touch of a cluster of leaves revolved it slowly, tracing like the leg of a compass, a thin red circle in the water. Some might call Fitzgerald's writing purple prose, but you know what, Anthony? I like purple.
Purple's good. Yeah, no, I don't know. I feel like he overdoes it though. Like that was beautiful. It almost felt like poetry, but I don't know. There's a scene in the party when where you learn about all of these different people that are attending the party, and I don't get it. Why am I learning about all of these people that are going to Gatsby's party? It seems, I want to say, superfluous.
Okay, I will side with you on that one. There really isn't a way that you need to know that. But I also think he's setting the scene to show how Gatsby is kind of on the outside, and a lot of these people don't even know who Gatsby is. And it's just, I can see it being superfluous, but
Yeah.
I think he just likes to describe things. And I like that too, but it's absolutely valid that you do not. So what are we going to talk about next? Characters?
Yes, I'm ready to talk about these characters. How do you want to do this? Do you want to do it character by character? I'll go, you go, I go, you go, or do you want me to go through what I have to say about everything, and then then you tell me what you think about these characters?
Yeah, why don't you just go through all the characters and let me know how you feel about them, and then I'll let you know, because I want to hear what you say first.
All right. One of my notes that I wrote down here was, if I had a quarter for every character that I cared about in The Great Gatsby, I would have very little pocket change. There are a lot of characters in this book, all of whom I loathe with a passion that I did not know was emotionally possible. But, and I'm gonna focus, but I'm really gonna focus on like the main cast of characters from the book, like Gatsby, Daisy, Tom, Jordan, and Nick. Gatsby is a liar and a potential criminal who fell in love with an 18-year-old when he was 27. I'm 27. I'm almost 27. If I fell in love with an 18-year-old, that still feels weird to me. That's almost a decade apart. And he never got over it to the point where he fell in love with an 18-year-old when he was 27 and never got over it to the point where he amassed a fortune just to try and win her over years later, and started an affair with her, even though she's now married. While he could probably be compelling, I find him more pitiful than anything. And it hurts to say that from like, since he's like the titular character, but wow, like, quit whining, bro.
Although I do have to say, Anthony, we do have to remember the time it's in, and I don't think relationships between 18-year-olds and 27-year-olds are quite the same as they were now. I'm not saying it was right back then, but I think it was more common. So I did want to make that point, but continue on.
Just iffy in my point, but okay. I think I wrote down in my notes, I have the least amount to say about Daisy, but then she also has the largest paragraph in all of my characters, so I don't know what that means. I have the least amount of problems with Daisy, especially since she's such a tragic character, due to the fact that she's stuck in like an abusive relationship in 1920s America, which wasn't a particularly empathetic time and place to be a woman. My main problem with Daisy is that I feel like she has options. I may not know a whole lot being a white man in the 2020s, but like she has Jordan, she has Gatsby, she has Nick, all on her, I want to say on her side, but she has these people that care about her, where if she wanted to go get away from her abusive husband, I feel like she has that opportunity. Gatsby has the funds to keep her, the funds to keep her going, the funds to keep her safe. But I don't know, maybe it makes sense, maybe not like in a legal divorce sense to get away from Tom, but I feel like she has a lot of opportunities to keep her safe away from Tom. But once again, I don't know if I have a lot to say about it just because who I am. And then, other than that, Daisy kind of killed a lady at the end of the book, and don't know how to feel about that one. Let's see. Moving on to Tom, he is a racist, sexist, abusive, possessive monster, and I don't like him. He's the worst, and I feel like I have the least to say about him. Jordan is a bad best friend who sees Daisy being abused and cheated on and does nothing to help her friend. Other than that, I see Jordan as mainly a device used by Fitzgerald to connect Gatsby to connect Nick Carraway, our protagonist, whatever, to Gatsby. When really we could have learned all of these new things about Gatsby, like from the people at the party that Fitzgerald is talking about. And I guess Jordan is just another reason for Nick to become cynical by the end of the book. And now Nick, my least favorite character in the entire thing, and that includes Tom in this whole thing. Other than being a lying liar who lies to me the entire time during the book, Nick is whiny, he's self-criticizing, and he's a rich boy. And I've had people argue with me, no, he's not rich. He's living in a bungalow in the rich part of Long Island, surrounded by mansions. He has a job that he never does, and he also sees his cousin getting abused and cheated on, does nothing to help her. He flip-flops on whether he's willing to be a passive or an active character throughout the story. This really, really creepy part in like the middle of the book, he imagines himself stalking a woman back to her home, which that was real uncomfortable. And then he plays the victim, announcing that so many horrible things are happening to him. He's like, oh no, this is all happening to me. By the way, it's also my birthday, just to add that on top of it. And yeah, like I said, he's not willing to be a good person. And as like the main character, that bothers me. Like, I know, like we've had a discussion before about characters that we don't like, but tell me what you think about these characters.
Okay, we have had this discussion before,
Yeah.
so come on, let's get right to the point about these characters. None of them are likable. I 100% agree with you. I don't really like any of them. They're all terrible people, disengaged at best, and abusive at worst.
Yeah.
However,
Okay.
Susan doesn't need her characters in a book to be likable people. Yes, I just use third person. I don't need if you only like characters in books that are likable, there's a lot of books you're not going to enjoy reading. A lot of thrillers these days have a lot of unreliable narrators and everyone in there is horrible. And I love those books. I don't necessarily like a book like Gone Girl. That was a little too much even for me. But I'm like, if you only like likable characters, you're leaving a lot of books out. Now, when you're not supposed to be likable, I'm fine with that. I have more of a problem if it's a character that you're supposed to like, but is unlikable. That I don't really like. But I love unlikable characters because I really like my characters to have flaws. That's more realistic. It's truer to life. And it's more interesting to me. That's me, though. That's Susan. You don't have to be like that. And that's perfectly valid. But I also like how unreliable narrators keep you on your toes, especially if you are reading through and you don't realize they're unreliable at first, and then suddenly it hits you, oh, this person's an unreliable narrator, and then you can never trust anything they say. That makes a great book. So I did enjoy, when I was reading it, I do feel like Nick is on the outside of the story. Yes, he's on the inside too, but I think he really does keep himself on the outside. But I think he really does keep himself on the outside where he's kind of lingering around the edges. He's doing a lot of observing and he's there. But, you know, like for instance, when he's in the apartment where Myrtle and Tom live, he is like observing everything. He's there, but he's not really participating in things. Thank goodness. Don't put that in there. I feel like he doesn't quite fit into this society, even though he lives there and he's part of it. His cousin is there. As Anthony just pointed out, he does act like a poor relation, and you can tell he has plenty of money. He comes from a wealthy family, and he really is in a highly privileged position. You know, maybe he's not as rich as Gatsby, but he's got plenty of money, and he definitely plays at being the poor relation. I like how Gatsby is such a mysterious figure, and I feel like we never really seem to find out the true story about him. You know, there's so many different versions of Gatsby that you read about. It's like, okay, well, really ever find out. I do find Gatsby to be a little bit of a sympathetic character, even though I do agree he's unlikable. But Daisy really did break his heart when she married Tom, and he wasn't able to get over it. However, he did take his obsession way too far. The lengths he went to impress her and win her back were a little ridiculous, very extreme and a little stalkerish. Okay, a lot stalkerish. But I can't help but feel so frustrated that in the end, Daisy managed to abandon and betray Gatsby again with no consequences. What in the world? Poor Gatsby. And Anthony, your commentary on Tom, exactly what I was thinking. I don't even want to give him the space or the time. He's a horrible, horrible person. And I'm also mad he had no consequences. I don't really think Jordan is very well fleshed out as a character. I think this might be one of Gatsby's weaker characterizations, even though I know she's more of a minor character. As Anthony, as you said, she's used more as a plot device and for exposition. I'm just not interested in her, to be honest. The whole romance between her and Nick is kind of strange. I don't get it. They're really weird with each other, and I just feel like they're kind of using each other. I didn't really like that, so I find Jordan to be a little boring. She's like so typical of the girls at that time, like, oh, I'm so bored with everything. I'm so wealthy and I play tennis. And I was just like, oh gosh, she's so boring. But I think, you know, it was almost like, oh, look, there's no one else around here for me to date. So let's hook up Jordan and Nick. Let's just date so we have something to do. I just was like, So let's talk about Daisy. Okay. I also found her to be a fascinating character. I do have a lot to say about her, though. I do have so much sympathy for her. I do want to say that because she was married to a monster. But also I feel like she's very manipulative herself. She's really selfish, and everything she does has a motivation. Everything she does has a motivation that only seems to help her. She's always looking out for number one. She doesn't care about other people. She uses other people. But I'm still fascinated by her. I found her to be one of the most interesting characters in the book, to be honest. We don't really get much insight into her point of view. There's a lot of things that we don't know about her from her, but we get a lot of the information about Daisy from other characters such as Jordan or Gatsby. That's really where we find out her story, besides, or in spite of the fact that she's actually Nick's cousin. So we should find out a lot more, you know, from Nick's point of view, but we find out a lot from other characters. I find her story to be an interesting glimpse into when you had to be married to be safe and respectable. But if you find yourself in an unsafe situation, there's really nothing you can do. I understand what you said about her being able to get out of the marriage, but stop and think for a minute about what it was like. This was what, the 1920s, 1930s. You couldn't, if you got divorced, you were a pariah. It was hard enough to get divorced if you were like a poor person, but a wealthy person that's in society getting divorced from someone who's wealthy, and it's not as easy as a thing. You know, perception was everything. You could lose your station in society by doing things like that. So it wasn't that easy to get out of a marriage like that. Sometimes it's not even easy now to get out of a marriage like that. It's more usually like, oh, I can't leave because of kids or finances or anything. So she didn't have to worry about money. That is true. But say she divorced Tom and her parents were like, well, no, we're going to cut you off. She has a child, even though we don't find out that much about their child. So it's not that easy to leave in those times. I understand what you're saying, but I never want to, like, victim blame or anything.
Of course.
But it is frustrating to see her with Tom. Like, I mean, they're both seeing other people. They're obviously not happy in their marriage, even if Tom wasn't this horrible person. So it's just really sad to see how her life is. It seems very bleak. But when Daisy hits Myrtle and flees and then runs away, all the sympathy I have for Daisy flees as well. I mean, that's out the window.
Yeah.
I hate that Tom and Daisy are really both to blame for Myrtle being killed, but Gatsby has to pay with it with his life, and they both get away. No consequences, and that bugs me.
Yeah, it's so funny. We talked about a lot of the same points, and then I guess it's so funny that we talk about the same points about why I dislike the character, and they're exactly the same reasons why you like the characters. It doesn't make sense in my brain. Like, none of them. I don't know.
Let's talk about themes, Anthony, and I have more on what you just said later.
Yes. Okay. So let's see. Ultimately, what does it seem like this book is trying to get across to the what is it trying to get across to the audience? What are they supposed to take from it? Themes like the destruction of the American dream, criticism of the ultra wealthy and their lifestyle choices, and the importance of moving on from the past often seem to be what I notice people like taking from this book. And those are absolutely valid themes to take away from it. But I would also argue that if you're going to take those themes away from it, there are a lot of other themes in this book that people have to take away from it, like the romanticization of death and anti-homosexuality and anti-Semitism. While the book does represent a world where the American dream isn't really a possibility, it's still more of a possibility in this novel because of the amounts of wealth that these characters have. They have these large, extravagant parties. They have these cars that take them in and out of the city in the wealthy parts of Long Island. They're living the luxury of the American dream. And if you want, but I suggest that if people want like a good piece of literature that expresses the deconstruction of the American dream, then I think that Death of a Salesman does it better because it focuses more on characters that an everyday American can like connect with, rather than Mr. Richie Rich, who lives over in this large mansion in Long Island. Fitzgerald, for my second point, which was the romanticism of death, Fitzgerald kills off several characters like we talked about. He kills off Mr. and Mrs. Wilson and Gatsby. Mr. Wilson's death was tragic because of his suicide after killing Gatsby, either because he couldn't live without his wife or because he knew he wouldn't survive the legal system after sacrificing Gatsby for his vengeance. Mrs. Wilson's death was just used as a tool to elevate Gatsby's death, who was killed protecting the identity of Daisy, which kind of seems heroic in a way. The three deaths, one after the other, are seen as beautifully romantic, either because you're sacrificing yourself because of you're saving someone else from like the horrors of what murder does to the people who murder people, or this guy is murdering and dying because he wants vengeance for his wife, which people can see as romanticized or heroic in a way. But no one was innocent. Everyone was doing something kind of bad, like the adultery or being an accessory to murder or murdering in general. I don't know. I feel like besides the dying part, I don't know. I can't read my own writing. But I think I wrote here that Mr. Wilson's death shouldn't be demonized while Gatsby gets out scot-free, because none of them are like innocent in any of this. You know, besides them dying, that all kind of sucks. My third point was the anti-homosexuality that I've noticed in the book. There are several moments in the book that indicate that Nick may have some romantic inclinations towards men. The ways that he talks, the scene with Mr. McKee in his underwear after Tom's party in the city. The way Nick sometimes talks about Gatsby and Tom, it might indicate a possibility that Nick is gay. But with Nick being an unreliable narrator, skipping over what happened in his drunken state with Mr. McKee, or having to remind the audience periodically that he's a good person, Nick shows that he's only trying to preserve himself in the world that he lives in. And he's only trying to preserve himself in the eyes of the audience, like the liar that he is. And by omitting any of his homosexual tendencies from his story, it kind of quietly demonizes the LGBT community. And then my fourth point was about the anti-Semitism in the book. It's incredibly strong. There are two moments that stick out the most to me. In chapter 2, Mrs. McKee makes a reference to a Jewish man who was attempting to court her in her youth by using, and she uses an incredibly anti-Semitic slur when referring to this young man. Then in chapter 4, Nick is introduced to a character by the name of Meyer Wolfsheim, who is described using insulting Jewish stereotypes. Milton Hindis, who is an assistant professor of humanities at the University of Chicago, argued in an article for the magazine Commentary that the use of such Jewish stereotypes was habitual, customary, harmless in an unpolitical variety. Fitzgerald claims to have said, when people criticize his use of anti-Semitic language in the book, that Wolfsheim fulfilled a function in the story that had nothing to do with race or religion. Throughout history, we've changed the way that we talk about certain people because we have realized that they evoke hate in others. Whether Fitzgerald intended to be malicious or not, he was, and his use of language, I think, is morally reprehensible.
I absolutely agree with that. That was like, oh no. I mean, you can say it was a different time like we did about marriage, but it's still like, oh no. Yeah. You know, I'm not saying cut it out or anything, but it definitely, it pinged on me like, whoa, you know, which it should. But honestly, Anthony, you really covered the themes pretty thoroughly. So I'm just going to talk about a few things.
Yeah.
What you said about Nick having homosexual tendencies, I mean, I thought, you know, we all agree he's actually in love with Gatsby, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he obviously, just the way he writes about him, I always thought that, even when I read it as a teen, that, oh, he's in love with Gatsby. And I feel like he's kind of living vicariously through Daisy's affair with him. And it's just, I almost feel sorry for him for getting caught up in this mess and thinking about the time that he was alive and how hard it was to be gay. It just wasn't that easy. But that's really all I had to say about the themes. I did want to say one of the themes that I thought comes from this line in the book, which Gatsby says, "You can't repeat the past," he cried incredulously. "Why, of course you can." And I felt like he was right. Unfortunately, he didn't realize repeating the past would be Daisy betraying him again, and this time it ending in his death.
That's fair. That makes me appreciate it a little bit more. Not a lot. I will not give anyone the satisfaction of saying that I like The Great Gatsby, but I do recognize that it is a very influential novel and that a lot of people really, really like it. I even have this is my personal copy. I own it. And I don't really care for it that much, but
this is my personal copy. It's a little tattered. This is the one I first read when I was a teen. And this is the one I reread again. I read part of your book.
Yes.
And I was afraid I was going to have it fall apart because it's a little fragile, Anthony. So I was like, yeah, let me go back to my battered copy.
But I think this was a really fun exercise, Susan. Thank you very much for sharing all of your thoughts on The Great Gatsby with me today. For the audience, whether you like the book or not, Remember that art is completely subjective, and that Susan's reasons for liking The Great Gatsby are just as valid as my reasons for not liking it. And yeah, I don't think I have a lot more to say on it. And I think we both touched on a lot of good points about it. There are a lot of good reasons and there are a lot of good reasons to both like and hate it.
Yeah, thanks so much, Anthony, for this thoughtful discussion of The Great Gatsby. I've really enjoyed it. You may not like the book, and I may love it, but as you see, there were a lot of issues and themes from the book that we actually really agreed on.
Yeah.
That's what makes literature so compelling to me. There are books for everyone, and we can all form our own opinions. Literature is really subjective, and what one person may not like, another person may love, and that's what makes books so amazing. But I like that we can discuss this, and it's just really enjoyable to discuss books. So thank you.
Thank you. Now, thank you, our audience, for enjoying us today. I hope you enjoyed our discussion. Sorry, there was a fly. Thank you for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed our little discussion. I can't wait to hear what your thoughts are. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And don't forget to hit that notification bell to get more content just like this at the Carnegie Library. Comment down below. Let us know what you think. I hope you're doing well. I can't wait to see you all very soon. Stay safe out there. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.